Today I'm going to talk about A Saucerful of Secrets by Pink Floyd. Album was released on June 28th in 1968 through EMI Columbia. It is celebrating its 55th anniversary. This is the album where Pink Floyd became what they would be known to be like throughout the late 60s and early 70s. It's the first album with David Gilmour and the last album with any contribution from Syd Barrett. It was around this time that Syd Barrett's mental health started to decline. The previous album was Piper at the Gates of Dawn. That was a different kind of Pink Floyd album. It was a very psychedelic album. Sounded a lot like 60s British rock. This album is not much different, but they started to form their own sound. This album was recorded in the EMI studio and Delaney Leah studio, both in London. The album was produced by Norman Smith. They recorded a few songs that did not appear on the album, such as Vegetable Man, Apples and Oranges, and Paint Box. And there was actually a short time when this band was a five-piece, including both David Gilmour and Syd Barrett. This album cover is very trippy and psychedelic. It was the first album cover created by the design group Hypnosis. And another thing I found that was interesting is that the album cover includes some of the art taken out of an old Doctor Strange comic book. I'm going to put both images on the screen right now so you can see what I mean. I thought that was interesting. It's something I never knew. Let's talk about Syd Barrett. He had a lot of substance abuse problems at this time. He was using a lot of psychedelic drugs such as LSD, and he began to go through a lot of personality changes. And these changes were kind of gradual. So, for example, like one weekend he just went missing completely, and according to like several friends, including Richard Wright, he came back and he was like this completely different person. So, for example, like during on their tour with Jimi Hendrix in 1967, there was a guitarist from the band called The Nice. His name was David O'List, and he actually had to substitute for Barrett on many occasions because a lot of times Syd Barrett was just unable to perform, or he just wouldn't show up at all. It was around this time when Pink Floyd asked David Gilmour to join as a second guitarist. He was covering for Syd Barrett, and they actually kept Syd Barrett as a non-touring member eventually. The last song was Jug Band Blues from this album. That was like any contribution from Syd Barrett. And also on April 6, 1968, they officially announced that he was no longer a member. And it was actually the same day that their contract with Black Hill Enterprises was terminated. But it's also interesting that Black Hill Enterprises kept Syd Barrett because they considered him to be the band's musical leader. And Syd Barrett would actually later release a few solo albums. He released like two in 1970. And then he kind of stayed out of the spotlight. And he lived a long time after that. He died in 2006 from pancreatic cancer. So that's what happened to him. Let's talk about the songs now. There are 7 songs. So on side 1, we got 4 songs. 3 are written by Roger Waters and 1 by Richard Wright. Side 2, we have this very epic, long instrumental. It was the title track that's co-written by the band. And then there's a song Seesaw written by Richard Wright, and the final song Jug Band Blues. That was the Syd Barrett song, and the last one with Syd on vocals. So let's talk about all of them. Opening track, Let There Be More Light. This was written by Roger Waters. The song starts with this iconic bass line. The vocals were done by both David Gilmour and Richard Wright. It's the first song with a David Gilmour guitar solo, like towards the end. The song is very like science fiction oriented. It's about a spacecraft at the Royal Air Force Marshall. The song has some similarities with the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still, and another 1953 novel called Childhood's End, and that would be a song on our later album. It was also speculated there was a verse that makes reference to John Carter of Mars, another sci-fi novel, and the song also references the Beatles' Lucy in the Sky. The song is very like trippy and psychedelic. It has a sound similar to many of the songs from Piper at the Gates of Dawn. So the second track is Remember a Day. This is written by Richard Wright. He was on lead vocals. So this one has Richard Wright on piano, and Syd Barrett plays some slide guitar. The song is very like dreamy and poetic, and It's about like a lost paradise of early childhood. This song was only performed once. It was later played a few times by David Gilmour and Nick Mason during his Saucerful of Secrets tour, and they played it during the Richard Wright tribute after he passed away in 2008. The song is very like 60s sound. It's different from what they would be playing later. Has some haunting piano parts and acoustic guitars. Third song is Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun. This was written by Roger Waters. The lyrics are taken from a Chinese poetry book. This is the only song recorded by Pink Floyd to feature material from like all 5 band members, as there were several different guitar parts recorded, some by David Gilmour, some by Syd Barrett, and there are many different guitar parts like kind of like mixed in. They performed the song live from 1967 to 73. So this will be an example of Pink Floyd doing like space rock. It's a very trippy song. There's lots of psychedelic keyboards and like those like tribal sounding drums. Then Corporal Clegg, written by Roger Waters. This one also features David Gilmour, Nick Mason, and Richard Wright sharing the lead vocals. And I think this is the only Pink Floyd song where, they did that. Kind of a weird song. They use a kazoo in the song. It's about a shell-shocked soldier. He lost his leg in World War II, and it's the first mention of war in a Pink Floyd song. This is something that Roger Waters would write about very often. Roger lost his father in 1944. I've spoken about that in other videos, but this is kind of like the first like war song, I guess you can call it that. And another one that's very classic. It kind of has that classic sound, like that 60s Piper at the Gates of Dawn type of sound. So now we go over to side 2 of the album. Opening track, A Saucerful of Secrets. It's just this multi-part instrumental. It's nearly 12 minutes long. Composed by Roger Waters, Richard Wright, Nick Mason, and David Gilmour. It's very trippy. There's lots of guitar feedback. There's a percussion solo, and there are vocals, but like without words. So the song is divided into like 4 sections. So the first part is called Something Else. It's very slow and atmospheric with psychedelic keyboards. Not much going on, but it builds up to something, into a syncopated pandemonium. This is the part where they have this like a drum beat and haunting keyboards with some piano sounds. And this one part like it sounds like a spaceship taking off or something like that. And then Storm Signal, it's a short section. It has these like trippy keyboards. And then the last part is called Celestial Voices. This is where it sounds like church organs. And they have these like choir-style background voices. So this is like a long song. It goes on like for almost 12 minutes. And then there are 2 more songs. The next one's Seesaw. This is a Pink Floyd song written by Richard Wright. And the second Richard Wright song. This one, he is on vocals and piano, and then he plays like an organ, xylophone, and mellotron, different instruments. So there's a theory surrounding the song. It's about like this toxic brother-sister relationship, and including like the loss of a child, a sister killing the brother. For example, one of the lines from the lyrics says, sits on a stick in the river, sisters throwing stones, hoping for a hit. He doesn't know, so then she goes up while he goes down. So others have said it's just about loss of childhood. It's similar to the previous song in the album, Remember a Day, also written and sung by Richard Wright. So this one is very similar to like the first album. It's more of a soft and relaxing type of song and has some different types of instruments used. So Jug Band Blues is written by Syd Barrett. His only song on the album and the last one he published for the band. There's a music video of the song featuring Syd Barrett, and you see him like with the psychedelic lights and the acoustic guitar, and the group is kind of like in the background. I guess they're like lip syncing, if you want to call it that. But it's very like a psychedelic video, and the lyrics have been interpreted as a reflection of his schizophrenia. It's also argued that they could have been understood as criticism of the other band members for forcing him out. So it's kind of a weird song. Actually, it reminds me of the Beatles. It has like horns and other instruments. So that's all. Let me get to my final thoughts. I think it's an important album in the band's discography. It's when they started transitioning from that psychedelic band into what we would know them to be now in the early 70s. It's when we had the core of the band with David Gilmour joining, so I thought it was a very important album for this band, and it's a good album. I enjoy listening to it. I go back to it very often. It's one of those albums I like to put on before going to sleep. It has that kind of quality to it. So that's all. Let me know in the comments what you think of the album. Please remember to like this video. It helps me with the algorithm. Comment. I like to respond to all comments, and subscribe if you haven't already. I've done various Pink Floyd reviews since I started this channel, and I'm going to put a playlist right here of all the Pink Floyd reviews. So that is all. Thanks for watching, and check out everything else. So see you in the next one.